what I have in front of me here, I've got some household sandpaper. This is quite coarse. It's actually a P80. This is wet and dry paper, so incredibly fine. I'm going to be using it dry, so no water needed. Standard scalpel or craft knife, very fine wire wool of the fine grade, scissors and paper. At this stage, it's very I'm going to be quite bold with the image, so it's going to change quite radically because I'm going to introduce how we get darker tones into the paper dry point. The first thing I'm going to do is basically cut away this area, which is the inside of the cave. I'm using my scalpel to outline the shape, in this case the cave door, of which I want black. So I'm outlining the top of the cave door at the moment. And you'll notice I'm not going through, I'm literally just cutting the surface of the plastic. I haven't cut the bottom, I've just outlined the top cave. I'm now using the edge of my knife to peel away, and you can see it's peeled away the card. And it's giving me some very interesting and random peeled effects. And I use sometimes my blade to control the direction of it. And anywhere where you are exposing grey card, like this, it will absorb a lot of black ink, so it'll really print quite rich. And these tear effects are really quite interesting, and it allows a bit of spontaneity to get involved. But you'll notice, up against my cut edge here, it's a nice clean line. Let's get rid of that. I'm also now going to remove the whole of the sky. So this sun, I've decided, is going to turn into a moon. But I'm going to outline the shapes of the trees in quite a sort of radical inverted commas, but quite bold shapes. I'm not going to try going up to their details. You can obviously do that if you so wish. So again, I'm using my knife to just outline the tree sections. Just doing the tips of the big trees now, and also the top of the hillside there. Again, if you're not particularly neat with your cutting, please use a craft mat underneath, probably generally good practice. I'm also going to, these little bits of smoke coming up here, I'm actually going to outline quite close to them because I really like the little spots. I like the idea of them in contrast to a black sky. And this tip of the tree and the last bit of smoke. So anywhere I cut through the plastic, top surface gives me a clean edge from which to peel away to. So start my peeling. Now I want this all to be black, so I'm going to peel away all of the white with plastic coated surface. You'll already see shapes emerging. Just be careful when using the edge of the blade. You can also use the tip of your etching needle if you don't feel safe using the edge of the blade. Please don't lose your fingers. That's a smoke line. And in here there's a tiny little bit between two smoke lines. And now we're starting the main landscape background. You know, I'm being quite brutal with it. And I'm actually, having looked at the way the card peels, and the card does have a grain to it, the way it's manufactured. Sometimes it peels in a nice straight line really easily, other times it kind of, just going around the moon sort of shadows there, other times it kind of just flakes away. And I'm quite liking this flake up here, so I'm actually going to leave that. Again, a decision you can kind of make on the fly. Don't ever feel there's a rule to any of this. Just doing the last bit now. I'm not too keen on this edge here, so I'm going to just go in from the other direction and just fluff it up a bit, and I can also sort that out in inking. Great. Okay, already quite a dramatic change. Next, I'm going to be using the sandpaper. This is the coarse sandpaper, and I tend to fold it into sort of the size I want. And I'm just going to be sanding the cave a bit more to make it tonally different from the background. The sandpaper creates a very strong grey tone because it's scuffing the plastic up. What I'm using here, just some scrap paper, and I'm actually going to cut the approximate outline of my cave so I can make a mask, so I get a nice clean line for my tonal work. And again, this is an approximate outline as you just saw, and I'm just literally putting that on the dry plate and I'm sanding up and over to it. I'm not a particular one for precision in some cases, and that was a moment where a freeform mask did a better job. Let's get rid of all that. Make sure when you sand it, just get rid of any sort of scuffy bits because they get caught in your ink. Now I'm going to use the wet and dry, which produces a very fine tone, and I'm actually just going to go round the moon. Not the moon itself, I want that nice and white, but the little lines next to the moon. Just they don't stick out as much against the night sky. And I'm also going to use a mask again. I want this background hill to be a grey tone, so I'm just cutting two. You can obviously also tear it. I happen to want cut marks. Putting one there. Again, approximate. You can be, if you wish, more precise. Creating a nice strip for me to sand in. And the sandpaper is quite difficult to see when you have a plate in front of you, so you kind of have to feel it, and it's coarser, so you know you've got some information there. Lastly, let's get rid of those ones. I'm going to use the wire wool. This is a fine grade, you can obviously use different grades. And I'm going to go over the smoke lines because they're going to stand out quite a bit, and I want them to be more in amongst the night sky. And I'm also going to add a bit of wire wool information down in the ground. There we go. Again, it's difficult to see, nigh on impossible. It's a case of feeling it with your fingers. Give it a good blow to the side. That can go away. You'll notice I'm now filming in landscape. Not only is that research on my part that's actually better, also a case of someone pointed out it works better on YouTube. So I might have actually researched the actual order of all these micro workshops. I obviously didn't research my filming, so just switched to landscape. Again, same ink as always, just giving it a bit of work. And away we go. The areas of black, i.e. the bits you've exposed of grey card, will hold a lot more ink. So be generous. Don't try and spread butter too thin on toast. Really whack it in there, get it covered. You want them to be nice and black. And if you've got any really delicate areas where you cut around shapes, like this is where my little roulette smoke wheel detail was. Sometimes the plastic can get kicked up when you're scraping, so just again be careful and nice and delicate. Standard wiping. And again, gentle around any areas where you've left tiny bits of white plastic because you don't want to lose them. And again, when wiping down areas like the night sky where you've had a lot of black ink, it will be stiffer and it will take longer. But just be patient with your plate. No rush. And whilst all this is happening, I've obviously had my paper sitting in a bucket of clean water. When I say bucket, I don't literally mean builder's bucket. It's more like a water bath, i.e. my sink. But let's call it a bucket. Right, so you can begin to see what's going on. This is the smoke coming up here. My cave is nice and black down here and rich. Okay, this is where you need to kind of also have a bit of artistic license. How much ink do you want to remove? I want to remove more ink from the foreground so I can see the detail of the fire. So I'm going to do that. And I want a bit more contrast at the bottom of the hill. And I want to see some of that texture I added. But I'm going to leave some of this ink on in the night sky. I like it. I'm just going to make sure some of the wiping marks aren't in the direction I don't want. So kind of, make them the correct direction. Notice I put my finger in the cloth now, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean out the moon. I want the moon to be glowing, and I'm going to clean out a bit around it like that. And I'm again just going to clean out my trees so you can see a bit of detail. Clean the foreground a bit more so you can see those grasses and areas of interest. But you can see how dramatically the print has already changed. And I think I'm just going to work that smoke up here a bit more, because I want to see those roulette marks. Brilliant. Make sure I've got no fingerprints, and I think we're ready to go. Always get a last fingerprint in there. Check the back. Looks all fine. I'm just going to disappear off screen to get my paper. And my blotters are usually ordinarily stored in, you'll see the drawer, here the drawer coming out, in one of my plan chest drawers, because I don't actually have the space to have blotters laid out all the time. So just blotting off the paper, so it's nice and evenly damp. Obviously if you do store blotting papers in a drawer, please make sure that if they've got really wet you air them, otherwise they're just going to stay damp in your drawer and go mouldy. That's not what you're wanting. Okay, let's have a look at this. When you've done a lot of black work and peeling off the plastic, just peel it off really slowly, because sometimes the glue from behind the plastic sticks to your paper and tears it. So just peel off slowly. There we go. Massive change in the image. Nice and dramatic, much more strong in my